Okay, then you want, okay.
Hare Krishna. So today I am very happy to have the opportunity to present Hanumatpresaka Maharaj, who is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he is very interesting by the topics of psychology. And thank you very much, Maharaj, to make you available for this small Zoom meeting. And maybe first of all, I can ask you about to introduce yourself and introduce your interest for the topic of today, about Carl Jung and the Bhaktisiddhanta school, if it is possible.
So, again, my interests.
Yes.
Well, I'm interested in eating and sleeping. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There we go. Okay. Well, I tell you, I have a PowerPoint show. I look through my, my archives here, and I have a PowerPoint show that we did actually here in Houston some time ago at Rice University, which includes a little bio data for myself and everything else. And I think it will cover everything. You know,
Yes. Very good.
can
Huh?
you see our
So we
screen
can see.
now?
We can see. Huh? We can see.
Okay.
So,
This is science, psyche, and spirituality. The encounter of Professor Carl Gustav Jung with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. Okay. And here we have pictures of Jung as an older gentleman and Bhakti Siddhanta as a younger man. Yeah.
yes.
Then we're presenting ourselves as Hanumatpresaka Swami, Professor H. Robinson. Okay. And then our own institution is NEOS, North American Institute for Oriental and Classical Studies, which was started
Mhm.
in 2004, I think. It's incorporated in the state of Tennessee, and it's a nonprofit educational corporation. And with it, we've been doing good academic publications and do touring for educational programs, lecture symposia in South America, Spain, India, like that. And we finally consolidated everything in terms of 5 movies, which we have up on Vimeo, pretty much consolidating all this work that we've been doing with ourselves, Niels. Yeah. And so then, of course, this was done. Looks like this was done for Rice University, which is a very prominent university, and very progressive, very nice. Here in Houston,
Mhm.
2024 February. So it looks like it was about 1 year ago. Okay.
Mhm.
And I remember not remembering. It was a very good program. Many faculty members came, and they were very happy. So here it is. Okay, there's a picture of me, my body, some time before. And we were born on the island of Guam. Do you know where the island of Guam is?
Not so much, Maharaj.
Do you know Saipan or the Marianas Islands?
Okay.
Oh, okay. They're in the Pacific, and I think they're closer it's on the way to Japan, whatever, south of Japan. And it was a big battle place during World War II, and then the United States kept Guam, that one island, for it was called a protectorate or something. And so my parents were there at the end of world after World War II was over. They met, fell in love, got married, and I was born there. And so that was 1948 in the island of Guam. Okay. Then we grew up, and I remember as a little child, we were in Arizona, which is desert, sunshine, fresh air, space. And my mother's parents have been pioneers there. Okay. But then eventually I graduated in psychology from the University of California, 1970. I got a first place prize
Nice.
and have minor studies in biology and electrical engineering. Okay. And I just had started improvisational theater, investigating improvisational theater. So then I went to Northwestern University for because I applied to UCLA, University of California in Los Angeles, and Northwestern University in Chicago, and they both offered us a full fellowship if we would come and study at their universities. So we went to Chicago, something different, and started investigating the whole academic career and everything else. And we were very fortunate. We had Donald Campbell. He was president of the American Psychological Association as a mentor. And he was talking about everything and the future and the careers. And he was saying that basically, what I was doing now at that time was just a part of a career tract. And, you're going to have if you just surrender to the system and you go up the ladder, but you're not going to be able to do anything creative or individual on your own until you're at least 40 or 45 years old. And so that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't very encouraging because so many fantastic things were coming out, especially from Asia at that point in terms of psychology and spirituality and so on. You
Yes.
um, uh, And so he said, if I had any manly qualities, you got any manly qualities? Yeah. He said, you head east, just try, sleep under the bushes a few nights in your life and just try out going right to some of these traditional monasteries and things like that. So we did that. And then we ended up coming in contact with Chaitanya or Bengali Vaishnavism. Yeah. Yeah. In
Yes.
1974, so on. And that's when we took initiation from finally from Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, you know. And of course, his spiritual master was Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, which means actually it means the uh, the Siddhanta, the boy conclusion to dedication to the perfect conclusion. Dedication to the perfect conclusion. Yeah, yeah. Bhakti Siddhanta conclusions like that. And and that's very much a part of the whole Indian perspective like that. So that's how we got involved. Our background, our qualifications, our nature, our ability. And then going on like that with ISKCON and everything else, then we started NEOS again in 2004. And
Mm-hmm.
before that, we were involved with the Bhaktivedanta Institute, among other things, especially
Mm-hmm.
with Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami from Manipur, who people might know and of course are very, very dear to us. And from him, actually, I took this vows as a lifelong monk and traveling and doing so many things, science programs with Nobel laureates. And we were all working together on so many projects. Then NEOS, we started our own organization because the Bhaktivedanta Institute was more aimed towards the physical sciences, and our,
Mm-hmm.
our nature is more cultural anthropology. And so we kind of did that. There was no instrument available like that. So it's kind of, that's any questions in about us, or that's kind of like a good summary or an adequate summary of our interests.
So it seems,
Yeah.
Maharaj, that this interest that you have for psychology and to know about the personality, the emotion, it is from the beginning of your life.
Uh, yeah. Well, actually, I remember Arizona, which is a kind of mystical place in Southern California. But then pretty early, we were up in the San Francisco area. And the whole atmosphere on the West Coast was very much Oriental contact and again, the
Yes.
whole hippie thing. And so yeah, everybody was kind of into it, and it was a whole interesting era because it was right after World War II, and that time science was king. The United States was so powerful and energetic, and people were very much looking for everything. But so a lot of it was involved with science, and the introspective life wasn't known. It was there for some degree, but I wanted to go to church from the time I was 6 years old. I had one godmother who was sending me books and stuff, and the rest of my family didn't want to go, so they just dropped me off, and I was going to church, Episcopal church, Anglican church. But right from the very beginning, yeah, there was resonance in terms of introspection. Yeah, somebody was growling there.
So, so Baladev Prabhu,
Baladev,
yes,
yeah,
yes. Baladev is from Mongolia, Maharaj. Mongolia.
huh? Baladev, can you close your micro? Well, thank you. You're a great
Yes.
hero. Yeah.
So everybody want to speak, he may maybe put the end, the
Oh
yellow
yeah,
color, or like that,
the electric hand,
would be nice. Mm.
the electric
So Maharaj,
hand.
I have seen in your life that you have been to Japan to
Oh,
study martial art.
oh
Huh?
no. Actually, it's Okinawa, which
Yes.
is island south of Japan, and actually that came to me when I was in Sacramento. After that, then it turned out my parents, when they were in Saudi Arabia at the end of their, with the military, with the government, they met one Filipino guy, you know, Johnny Otter. And he moved to Sacramento and was working there, and it turned out he was just like maybe three blocks from our house. And so he was teaching Okinawan Oichiro karate. You know, yeah. First time I went to India was in 1978. Yeah, like that. And then that's funny, that was it came to us. It was Okinawan karate, but it was in in Sacramento, California. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a lot of mysticism, and we might call mysticism meditation, internal development, which is involved in. I learned a lot about how prana works and those kind of things from the karate.
Yes, Maharaj. Oh.
Shall we
So
go
now
on?
can you? Yes, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice. Oh yeah. Yes, this is a picture of we're mentioning Chaitanya or Bengali Vaishnavism. So this tradition that goes back to A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was there at the time of the British Raja, and actually he was prominent when Carl Jung visited India. Visited India. He was the dean of this tradition at that time. But it goes back to Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who you can find, I think, in the Britannica there, everything else, And he was very, very, very powerful, scholar, philosopher, religionist in India. He was about 6 years old when Columbus discovered America. Yeah, yeah, and the whole culture of India and everything else. And it's just fantastic experience for Western people to get an opportunity to see into these Oriental traditions and their depth and everything else. Our whole European arrogance has been to like cover these things. And now we're beginning to realize in many ways that they have tremendous amount of necessary perspective to offer, and that industrialization is not the only success in life. Okay, so there's A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, yeah, and then Carl Jung. Like, how do I get my sidebar out of the way here so I can move this? There we go. It's better. Yeah. Okay. So Carl Jung was born July 26th, 1875. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami was born, anyway, we'll see a little bit later. Okay, he was born in Keswill, Switzerland, and died June 6th, 1961, in Kurschnock, Switzerland. Okay, 1961. Okay. Swiss psychologist and psychiatrist who founded analytic psychology. His work has been influential in psychiatry and in the study of religion, literature, and related fields. He was fortunate in joining the staff of the Bergholzli Asylum of the University of Zurich at that time, 1900, when he was under the direction of Eugene Buehler, whose psychological interests had initiated what is now considered classical studies of mental illness. And this is a little citation from the Britannica. And here's Time magazine, which of course is one of the was one of the most powerful magazines in the United States, periodicals. And one issue they had Jung on the front cover. And so he was
Mhm.
again a very prominent, powerful person within the whole culture. So many of the people, what's his name, Abbie Hoffman and everybody else, all the hippies and the whole hippie revolution,
Mhm.
they were accepting him as their guide. You know? And what we're
Mhm.
discovering is still a very active movement. I mean, new literature is coming out, new things, the Red Book, so many things that Jung produced back then are now being, published and being devoured with very great interest. And many young people are joining his perspective, his followers, his movement, and so on, like that. So that's the one side of Carl Jung. And if we go ahead here, we'll try and go ahead here. Okay. Then we come to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Now you notice that Jung was born 1875. Bhaktisiddhanta was born 1874. Oh, this is what Jung would call a synchronicity. So it becomes extremely valuable immediately because Bhaktisiddhanta was also a powerful acharya, dean of studies in the East. And so he saw the industrialization of the Orient and their perspective, and Jung saw the industrialization of the West. And Jung was looking back at the mythical cults of Rome, the traditions of Africa, the United States. He knew people, William James and everybody else. They're all part of that culture. So both of them, when you go back to them, you get to know them, which is within a reasonable amount of time. Then you can look back. You have a lens to look back, tremendous resource to look back on the history and culture of both communities. Yeah, yeah. And below we have a very nice photograph of Bhakti Siddhanta. He's a little bit more towards the right there, taller, very tall person. And they would go out like Saint Francis of Assisi, singing the glories of God with a pure heart, and had flags, and musical instruments. And he started a very robust, philosophical, intellectual tradition. In the West, we have the Cartesian split. Happened this time of Descartes, Rene Descartes. He's not the only person who was responsible for it, but he got his name. And before that, the logical and intellectual life and the religious life were the same thing. The priest, the monk, they were all together the same thing. When India would be called a Brahmin. But in the West, the university went one direction, the church went another direction, and the university became concerned with, direct perception, rational thought, and on the opposite side was the church, which was concerned more with the, uh, a traditional authority and introspective life, like that. You know, And people, there are books called Healing the Cartesian Split and everything else. And of course, with the Bhaktivedanta Institute, we dealt with so much of this. But in India, even now, Brahmins are that culture, that kind of character within communities still respected. That to know nature is to know God, and to know God is to know nature. You know, and they're not different. And if you're actually going to express some godly advancement, then we should see how you should see how you should be also developing, knowledge of God's universe, and not and be is more competent, in dealing with physical reality than other people. So anyway, this is the Bhakti Siddhanta, okay, 1874 and 1937, also known as Bimal Prasad Dutt, was a Vaishnava guru of the school of Chaitanya, 1486 to 1533. And this is from the Brill Encyclopedia of Hinduism. It's a very, very excellent article, which is, quite respected within the academic world, So we have, a very good resource for introducing him. Okay. And of course, you made this point that they were born almost the same year. Bhakti Siddhanta was superior by just 1 year. Okay, following the line of Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Rupa Goswami, whose opus magnum was the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and that was translated by Professor David Haberman in terms of academic uh, translation. And then he was followed by Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So Rupa Goswami was the most powerful, prominent follower of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And again, he has so much literature, but his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is just an incredible uh, exposition on the culture of yoga, uh, and our particular perspective on yoga, which is very powerful. Comes from a broad tradition, and putting it within accessible terms, within the scientific perspective, like that. So again, it's a very rich, accessible tradition. Okay. And if we're looking at A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, when formally came to the West, landed in New York City during the whole hippie revolution, everything else. From his younger years, I don't know, when we first met Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, he was impelled, and others too, also to go and try and do something for the Western people, for their benefit out of mercy, but also because people were starting to follow all of these Western, so-called Western ideas, So in the process of his, work while traveling and everything else, he asked two of his disciples. I think one was Howard Wheeler, and the other was a person named Shama Sundar, to take I think what they had was a history of Western philosophy, and they would present different philosophers, and their ideas when they were traveling. Then Prabhupada would make commentaries like that. And these included Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, Descartes, 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 Leibniz, John Locke, Darwin, Henri Bergson, Sartre, and Freud. Okay, yeah. And then when these lectures and stuff were being transcribed, these dialogues, and so Howard Wheeler uh, said that, was it Carl Jung? Uh, so this ends the session on Jung. Okay, and Prabhupada said, so far he seems the most sensible. So there was a very, very strong appreciation. Many times Prabhupada was, quite, vehement about disagreeing with ideas and materialistic ideas, so many things that were being presented by different people, and also the nihilism of Sartre and so on. I am nothing is nothing. Okay, yeah. But when it came to Jung, he was going along with saying, well, that is correct. That is also correct. then he would say, "Well, that is not correct," and then maybe Howard Wheeler or Hayagriva would uh, expostulate a little bit more, then probably say, "Well, from that perspective, that is a very good idea." Okay, So anyway, there's this fact that from our tradition being represented by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami in a very clear, powerful, practical and what's the word, aristocratic format. He very much appreciated Carl Jung's work, and Carl Jung would probably very much appreciate. He did. He appreciated Oriental philosophy. Here we have our little picture of. Yeah, okay. Um, and this is the whole I think about how Western philosophy has come down from Socrates to Aristotle to St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventura. And of course, we have Salvador Dali down below. It's just a whole, maybe a separate thing would take much more time on our realization, understanding on the development of ideas in the West. So kind of skip that right now. And if we go ahead here, okay, let's go ahead and push our button. Then we come to Carl Jung, and Carl Jung says, "We Europeans are not the only people on the earth. We are just a peninsula of Asia. We are just a peninsula of Asia. And on that continent, there are old civilizations where people have trained their minds. Yeah, yeah, in introspective psychology for thousands of years. Whereas we began with our psychology not even yesterday, but only this morning. These people have an insight that is simply fabulous. Okay. This is C.G. Jung, analytical psychology, its theory and practice from vintage books, 1970, and page 48. And the next citation is on page 74. If you go to other races, to India or China, for example, you discover that these people are conscious of things for which the psychoanalyst in our countries has to dig for months. Yeah. So here we can see this. There's so many citations, as we can get into the whole thing about his actual physical visit to India, his intellectual perspective on this thing. And of course, again, this is back. I think these citations, this book, Analytical Psychology, Assyrian Practices, are taken from a series of lectures delivered at the Tavistock Foundation in England, and it's still a very, very, very what's the word? Active, respected institute, foundation in England. And so Jung was invited to give a series of lectures, and they're very famous. They're called the Tavistock Lectures. And there he's making these comments to very, very learned, educated people, doctors and academics and so on. And so you can see his appreciation. This was after World War I and before World War II. What's next? Okay, we have our archetypal self there asking questions. Well, we need a syllabus, okay? Some books that we can suggest for people to approach and they want to investigate more and become powerful global actors on the intellectual scene. And then we can also go into epistemology, ontology, and praxeology. Yeah. And the praxeology, of course, comes down to some projects and symposia we did. And we do have stuff here. Um, but at this point, any questions or comments? What do you think? No one's got their electronic hands up yet. Yeah. So I guess everybody is thunderstruck and dumbfounded.
Maybe they are shy, Maharaj.
Huh?
Yes, maybe it is because of shyness.
Abraham Lincoln said, if you remain silent, people will think you're a fool. But he also said, if you speak, though, you may remove all doubt.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Maharaj, it seems that Carl Jung is like it's like he's prepared to accept to be open to we can say to study something about the Indian philosophy, Indian psychology. It seems that he's already prepared, in contrast to the other philosophers, that we have seen Sartre or Descartes like that.
I don't exactly understand. How is he different than your French heroes?
Yes, I was saying that it seems that Carl Jung was already prepared to the topics, This why
Um,
it was already can say in tune to the Indian philosophy.
oh, okay, the Indian perspective. Uh,
Yeah.
I, in some ways, I don't think so. I mean, see what in our syllabus there, one of the things that there's Jung's own biography, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, which is a very interesting, book on how it was written, and everything else. But there he's talking about, with Anna Jaffrey, his own experiences from the time he was a child and everything else, and so forth, so on, you know, and how he was coming in contact with different intellectual ideas and communities. He was pretty much, I understand, he was born in a small town, small Swiss town in the mountains, and so he didn't wasn't in contact with great intellectual giants and everything else, like maybe in Vienna or places like that, in Zurich or Paris or something, in the beginning. And contact with India at that time from where he wasn't very much, but it was all starting because of the colonial activity, you know. And so yeah, there was like in Europe and stuff, very much like a what a great flood of commercial and resources and also intellectual resources coming back at that time. So that's how he got involved with it. But he wasn't the only person. You can see in Shonu Shamdashini did a fantastic book called uh, Carl Jung and the Making of Modern Psychology: The Dream of a Science. It's like what the word was like. It's a classic, I would say, in Western literature and investigation. But then you can see that Carl Jung was actually part of a whole community of other people and with their ideas. And at one point he was thinking of becoming an artist, for example, but then he had more interest in the sciences. Okay, so he went that way. But there was a whole environment. He was a part of it, and he accepted himself, as that. So I think partly. Do you know when the existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre? How do you pronounce it? Jean-Paul Sartre? How do you
Jean-Paul Sartre.
Jean-Paul Sartre?
Sartre.
Uh,
Yes,
when was he born? Much later. He wasn't born 1870. He was born in the 20th century, wasn't he?
I think so. Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yes,
So he
yes.
was
Sartre
coming
was.
out of a different environment. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh, but I think it was a fact that Jung was also, but I would memories. Yeah, there were French, philosophers and other people who were interested. But I think the difference was that Jung, right from his childhood, was having these, what do you call it, like more like let's just say mystical, you know, psychic experiences and stuff, and he wasn't sure exactly how to deal with them and dreams and this kind of stuff. And that's why, to some degree, he wasn't just presenting this because people they didn't know what's going on. It was at that time it was all totally new. And so that he would be classified as being crazy or something, but he wasn't. He was, on a more subtle platform. You know. So anyway, in that sense, I think yes, he was more ready to come in contact with a culture which was more and more introspectively and everything else, mature and stuff. Other people may have had things similar to him, but he was one person definitely who was coming into this life with a lot of, what yoga and everything else.
Mm. There is a comment in Maharaj in the chat. It is Chitra Ratamataji. She's from Switzerland. So she
Uh-huh.
said, Jung was Swiss, means he was not under the pressure of success from the greatness of the other European countries.
Okay. Yeah, it's the whole thing of, but I know some of these things, but other people also may know much more than we do. But yeah, I mean, Europe itself is a variety of traditions and perspectives, no? Yeah. The Gre Greco-Roman on one side, and then the other side you have the Arab traditions. And you go on up into the Nordic traditions, and the what do you call it, the blonde beast, an attack, because Hitler and everybody else, right? They were trying to go back to their more Nordic traditions and escape from the Judeo-Christian traditions, and so there was. Yeah, that's one thing I was saying. It's very different in Europe. In our perspective, the four movies we produced, that was one of them. We started in South America, then we went to the U.S. and we went to Europe and then India and in the movies journey. And the United States, pretty much academically, culturally, everything else, it starts about what, 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Yeah. And whereas Europe goes back, Spain goes back before Christ with the Peloponnesian Wars and stuff. And
Mm.
so Europe has a intermediary history, much more depth, cultural resources. Yeah. So so all these things are necessary, right? The whole world working together to try and solve our problems. And that's what we see. It was very, very important atmosphere because if you're working, it's a very active community. They're publishing new books and they're influencing people. Of course, they're influencing people who are on a very, very kind of high level in some ways like that. But it's a very active community, and they're open to these ideas and these perspectives. So we've been able to have very, very good meetings with people and and have influence. It's a whole area about the actual practical things we were doing there. You know. Should we go to the syllabus?
Yes, Maharaj. Yeah. There is another chat, Maharaj.
Okay, I'll click on the
Chitrarata.
chat.
At the beginning of 20th century, it was fashioned to be interesting in Asian philosophy. Hermann Hesse with the famous Siddhartha also.
Yeah. One of the people we met in South America, we did a program there, we did it in Chile, Santiago, and it was arranged at a one cultural center. It was a little bit of an older place, it had a nice atmosphere, maybe back from colonial times. And we did basically the same presentation, uh, and it attracted again, it attracted very, very like cultural people. And of course, in South America, there's more culture in some ways than North America. So one person was Umberto Maturana, was a Nobel laureate candidate. He came with his followers, and we had some very dynamic meetings with him. Then another person was a lady. She came, and she was the widow of somebody, and I forgot his name now. But he had been like a statesman, a politician, diplomat for the government of Chile. Uh, Almost coming to me. But anyway, he passed on. But they encourage people. They encourage their diplomats to be scholars and be interested in the intellectual life of who they were representing. So he then did a series of inter- interviews. He talked with Carl Jung, and he also talked with Hesse. Went and visited him, and Hesse was older at that time. He was staying with a lady who was his housekeeper. Very nice relationship. And somebody had donated a kind of a little bit of a country house, nice place, bigger place for Hesse to stay. And so in that dialogue is discussing how he's talking about with Hermann Hesse. And Hermann Hesse's father, maybe you know this, his father and grandfather both went to India as missionaries and South India, Canada. And his grandfather wrote the first English Canada dictionary. You know, And so then this diplomat was saying that, well, intellectual ideas and the new things in the world, but he said, but the Indians are just sticking with their reincarnation and karma, you know. And Hesse was saying, well, no, no. He says, if you got something good, you should stick with it. Okay, so he was defending that. And then he went ahead and he said, myself, my grandfather and father, they've gone to India and they went there, you know. He said, but myself, I never went. But he said, but through them, I learned to love the God Krishna. So, so yeah, it's a fact that all this contact was there. Yeah, yeah. And of course, the Vietnam War and everything else was also an incredible opportunity for the United States and everybody else. California comes so much contact with that Vietnam thing happening. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So the books that we did here, let's go ahead here. Then I can squeeze this, push that button, and I can go back to my PowerPoint show. It seems to have disappeared here. Okay.
Maharaj, your mic is closed. Cannot hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes. Thank you.
we didn't read the books in this order, but this is a very nice order to look at them. Yeah, if you haven't done any reading yet. And the first one is what is called Carl Jung's autobiography, but it was done with when he was very old at that point, you know, and it was done with forgot her name, one lady, as I mentioned it before, yeah, Anna Jaffrey, Anna Jaffrey, and Shonu Shamdashini, historian, says that she puts her own ideas about Jung's life in there and kind of attributes them to him saying it and that kind of stuff as far as he's concerned, you know. Uh, and he said another one is also a female disciple, lady, but she's like, more clear that this is what I think from having talked with you and what he was experiencing, you know. But pretty much this appears to be pretty authentic, you know. And anyway, he was going through this whole thing. He was a controversial person in many ways. And so when he was getting older, they said, many things you talk about are like confidential internal things. And please, before you go, leave your body, you have to just tell us about these things and your own experiences and so on. And Carl Jung was said, if I started talking about, what I've actually experienced and everything else, and it's just, everybody in the world is going to start jumping on me and beating on me like that. And he said, I'm only human, so I'm not going to do it. And they've been pushing him. He said, all right, I'll do it, but you can't publish it until after I'm dead. Then if they want to try and chase me and harass me, they've got to, go to the other world. So this is published after he left his body. It's called Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. And it's very readable, very stimulating. Uh, People I know who've read it, psychiatrists and ISKCON, everything else, they all comment about that. It's very readable, very interesting, very informative, and also very therapeutic. It really helps you, deal with your own particular devils and attachments and everything else you've got there. So it's a very good book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. Then, if we go ahead here, what else we got next? 1 year ago, I did this. Oh, yeah, the Tavistock lectures. And those are the ones I mentioned before, where I took those citations from those. And those, again, are mostly what he does basically, maybe 5 nights and in London. And then what he does is, I think he takes like case studies which makes it very interesting, going through different things, and we could talk about some of them. They're quite interesting. And again, this is when psychology was just developing, before people didn't even, just know about their minds or anything else. It just crazy people were just, something, the devils got them or something, and, just chained them up in a mental hospital. So the Tavistock lectures are very nice. Then the real heavy one I was mentioning before, Carl Jung and the Making of Modern Psychology, The Dream of a Science. And it took me like 2 months to read it. It's composed of what in Sanskrit would be called anuchedas, like little essays, maybe like, a page or 1 or 2 pages. And so Shonu Shamdashini picks out, different topics, ideas, people, and it goes forward like pretty much historically, but it's kind of like that sense that it's like, newspaper articles. And because Jung was such an acharya, such a great, what we should call it in English, a dean of studies of all these things, that by seeing how his life developed in the intellectual community, it's a look at. It's I don't think there's any better to really look at the development of psychological thought in the West, starting from his life and how it developed in the West and how we took the choices we've made and which has formed the way we look at the world. You know? Then another one which is nice is a series of lectures he gave on Kundalini yoga with a Methodist missionary who had gone to India to convert the Hindus to Christianity, and uh, and didn't he remained a Methodist, missionary, but he came to the conclusion that the Hindus had a tremendous amount of, you know, for Methodists to take tremendous amount of information that they needed to learn too. So it's very very nice series focusing on, that this of course with modern interests and what people are interested in. What do you call it? The Kundalini. We gave a whole series at Boise State University, a lecture on Kundalini yoga. So this becomes a very nice topic for reaching out with people who are interested in releasing their Kundalini Shakti. Yeah, yeah. And then psychology of yoga and meditation lectures delivered. Okay, volume 6, 1938 through 40. And these just came out more recently. And they were edited by, it wasn't Shonu Shamdashini. He's a very prominent modern scholar. He was, I think he's a Sindhi person from Singapore, and he was interested in some kind of guide in life, and so he ran across Jung and was very much motivated. Then eventually he became a professor of the history of medicine at the University of London Medical School, Department of History of Medicine. And so, of course, his focus was Carl Jung. But now I think he's moved up to being a dean, shared the position of dean of studies there, and very, one of the most powerful modern people. But he's not a psychotherapist. He's a scholar of the thing. Of course, the things are so connected. And they started a thing. What's it called? They have their own center. I forgot what it's called, but this is the work they're doing. Uh, he didn't translate. See, Carl Jung gave a series of lectures at one of the best technical institutes in Switzerland. Maybe I forgot the name of the thing, Atasi or something. And it's still one of the best technological institutes in the world, like Caltech, MIT. And so the students that had to take humanities. So he gave a series of lectures, like maybe on Friday afternoons and once a month or something. And it was just packed full, maybe 400 or 500 students, at least every single, and professors. And it's a whole just an interesting history, how those things were actually salvaged and extracted and then published. And maybe only about the first volume started coming out, maybe like about 10 years ago or something. And one person basically, he'd done his whole life to just do all this work to research and pull them out, you know. And it's tremendous. Everybody said they're much more valuable now than they were then in terms of understanding these things, just introspection, psychology, tantra, and they match up very much with the Bhagavad culture, and they illuminate it. They illuminate each other. Then there's the thing of Jung's private red book, which is a very big, beautiful leather-bound red book where he would do these beautiful art things and explain them in a very, very iconographic manner of his own experiences and so on. And that basically his family wouldn't even let it out because they thought people would think he was nuts. And so Shonu Shamdashini convinced them, you gotta let us see this, you know. So it's in a whole fantastic event how it was, brought out of the vault in a Swiss bank, and the Minister of Culture was there and everybody else. And after 100 years, it was brought out, and it was a gigantic, change in the perspective on Jungian psychology. But that was before the psychology of yoga and meditation. And then funny, it's not here, but we discovered a book, Carl Jung in India. Um, I've forgotten the lady's name. Maybe it'll come back. But she researched the whole thing and how Jung went to India, and exactly what we're talking about, specifically because he was involved, with so many cultures, and India and Asia were prominent, but it wasn't the only one. Um, and so she was a book, can't remember her name, but she was describing, and again, like all these things with Jung, it was just incredible. How things were popping up and things were coming out, and very much Jung's idea about synchronicity, that there's reality has, some kind of reality is alive. Okay, part of his idea. And so that was very interesting how Jung actually went to India, his contact with it before and after, what it is. It was available on Amazon, and most of these things are there, but then somehow it went off. So myself and Ravi Gupta, Radhika Mandas, we have copies of it, and I can't figure out why it wasn't in print. Yeah, yeah. But she's a very respected lady as a scholar. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. Then on the YouTube, you can look up. There's many, many, many things about Carl Jung, videos about Jung, and even of course, it's the whole thing. People studying, and he's coming back, becoming more prominent at this time. There's one interview I saw, which maybe is the only interview ever done with him. I think actually with him directly. And there's like a Stanford professor, maybe like 45 years old, behind the camera, and talking very respectfully, very intelligently with Jung, I think at his house in California or something, maybe even, or maybe in Switzerland. And Jung is older, and it's just so incredible because Jung is right there and talking about things, and you can see his character, you know, and and how, for example, talking about his experiences with Freud and the contrast, and the interviewer is making very good questions and stuff. So these are like such tremendous resources in terms of investigating Jung from our side. And we're looking for somebody who knows Jung like we know Oriental philosophy and our Gaudiya tradition. And so we can start talking back and forth because there's so many things on their perspectives which can help us understand why we're facing all these problems in the modern world. You know, how the evil one has been able to introduce his ideas. And of course, you already mentioned the Red Book. These are some of Jung's paintings. It's incredible. The dragon in the boat. Yeah. And from our side, then we recommend Light of the Bhagavata. He's all available on Amazon because it was designed by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. He wrote it as a specifically for a conference called Cultivation of the Human Spirit. And so we like it. We like Oriental perspective, Chinese perspective. So it's fantastic with its art and its modern comments. We have it down below here. We've done several symposia with this. Tamal Krishnamars was trying to organize a symposia at Cambridge, and that gave us further impetus. And it's always very popular. We have the beautiful art, which can blow up to 6 feet high. And then we organized it with local people. There's so many nice topics in there. And so it's a fantastic book. It's one chapter out of the Bhagavad Purana, 5,000 years old. And in there it says, if you want to understand more about this culture, you should read the works of the Goswamis, again, Rupa Goswami. And so for that, then the next book we offer is Nectar of Instruction by Hanumatpresaka Swami, just 11 verses with very nice commentaries. Then finally, we come ahead then to teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which is about Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago. And these are extracted from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is 17 volumes or something. And it's only 500 years ago. And so the mysticism and all the fantastic things, that you find from the Indian tradition are within our our modern world of like review and consideration. But still, it's a glimpse into a world 500 years ago when many things were different and which have been hidden from us in our Occidental perspective. The funny A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami did Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is the 10th canto of the Bhagavad Purana, our main text. And and that, of course, that's the kind of the conclusion. If you go through all the rest of these, that opens the window where you can, directly meditative, introspective fashion, just develop everything the tradition has to offer. Yeah. Well, this is a picture from Light of the Bhagavat. And again, you can blow. We have the files. You can blow this up to 2 meters. When you put this on in a library with handbills there, everybody stops. You see this thing, you know, it's done by a very fantastic lady, artist, and this Chinese rendering of Oriental philosophy, very nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Epistemology, ontology, and praxeology. It's a whole different process, and my face is starting to shrink. I'm starting to fall apart here. So maybe at this point we can, and these are different projects we've been doing. Yeah, yeah. So maybe at this point we're going to have to, I think, kind of stop for the day here. What time is it? Yeah. That's good. It's been 1 hour. Yeah, yeah. So any final questions or comments or complaints or donations? We're accepting cookies and milk.
No complaint, Maharaj.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe the devotee can open their mic and share their question or doubts or something like that.
Do you know Maharshi? Do you know? Have you heard about when Prabhupada visited France? You've
No.
heard, right? Well, one of my one devotee, Bhadra Varden, was there, and different people, Bhagavan and stuff, had a very hard time when they went to France and stuff. They got people shaking their fists at him in the audience and stuff, and he didn't was very totally unsuccessful. The Bhadra Varden said that Prabhupada went there, and then they had a very very big hall, and they did good advertising. At least maybe 500-600 people were there, and they advertised Prabhupada, and of course all of them had their typical, what's the word, like French arrogance and skepticism and you know yeah, okay, yeah, and all staring at him. And he said Prabhupada got up and he just kind of on this very strong personal presence looking at them, like little not I think that challenging, but what's the word, self-asserting, in his character and stuff here, Uh, and then he said, I hear that French people are fond of revolution. He said, therefore, I am here to propose a revolution. And he said, it
Ah,
just, no, he said, everybody, boom, they were just gone. They just, vive le Prabhupada. They were just like, they were just, and then Prabhupada went through and presenting things. And then he said, okay, and so if you're interested in more, we're installing the deities of Radha and Krishna here, so they can, that aspect of our culture can be appreciated, you know. Then he said, Krishna, Krishna is a transcendental woman hunter, like that, you know. And and he said, I have heard that the most beautiful women in the world are in Kashmir and France.
Yes.
So again, everybody in the audience is dying. Oh God, and in France, yes. And so he said, okay. So he said, Krishna has come to France to look for a French girlfriend. And he said, I predict that next he will go to Kashmir, so on. So anyway, Prabhupada had a very wonderful, interesting time when he was in France. Well, story group. Who's here? There are 16 people. Yeah.
From Atavi Krishna Prabhu, he has a question. He's from Mexico.
Well, who's
Atavi
okay?
Krishna.
Who?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. And in regard to there's a comment in the chat box. I can read it from Chitrarata Mataji. It says, at the beginning of the 20th century, it was fashioned to be interested in Asian philosophy. Hermann Hesse with famous Siddhartha. So I just heard from Hamsadutta Prabhu in his Prabhupada memories. Hamsadutta recalls Prabhupada's preaching, and he said Prabhupada gave a lecture in Sweden, in Uppsala University in Stockholm, Sweden. In one of after the lecture, one of the students asked, "What about Hermann Hesse?"
Oh,
He
yeah,
wrote
yeah,
Siddhartha.
yeah.
And Prabhupada, who's Hermann Hesse? And he says he's not one of the acharyas, so he just dismissed the whole thing, right?
Well, actually,
And then,
what he said was he challenged them. He said, "Is he one of the acharyas?" And then the guy kind of fell apart at that point. So no, yeah, probably didn't know who he was in that sense. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's right. He was like, "Oh, you don't know who Hermann Hesse is?" That's what the
yeah.
student asked Prabhupada, right? And Prabhupada said, "No, he's not one of the acharyas." So my question is, like, at other times, Prabhupada had dialogues with the Western philosophers, like in this book, Dialectic Spiritualism. So I was going to ask you, in which context did Prabhupada actually went into dialogues with Western philosophy, and at what time did he dismiss the whole Western philosophy? And
In my experience and perspective on this, the two people that I think he really liked were Socrates and Jung, and everybody else in between. He had a lot of conflict with them. Uh, I mean, same way. Yeah, so that's kind of what I understand. I mean, the way that Kant, how's it go? Socrates was Socrates was a religious guy, and he was going to see religious activities. He believed in the gods and everything else. And then it went from him to Plato, and then to Aristotle. And Aristotle, I don't think he was like an atheist exactly, but he would just wasn't any interest in transcendental personality in that sense. And then it was kind of lost, but it came through some Arabic, Al-Abin or something, and entered back into the West and the tradition. And then it went through St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventura, like that. And then on up to, and this is the point they make, is that Jung, he knew people who knew Nietzsche. I mean, he talked to people who directly talked to Nietzsche and everything else. And beyond that, he walked the same streets as Immanuel Kant. And so Kant was presenting his archetypal, what do you call them? What do you call the categories? That, a priori, his point was you're trying to make a rational empiricism, which is what Prabhupada was objecting to, as the absolute cause of everything, eliminating everything else. You're not including Socrates's archetypal forms, what do they call ideals, you know, and that was probably the revolution. So that we was arguing against. But then Kant was saying, well, no, before you even what's the word, even can see things, you have to have certain intellectual categories. You have to be able to divide things into individual things. You have to, and then Nietzsche went ahead and made it what's the word, archetypal with personalities involved. And then Jung was just coming through this tradition, and that aspect, as far as I can understand. And then the other person, he was a really famous Toynbee, very, very powerful historian. His father was an economist, I think. And there's a dialogue with him and Prabhupada. As I remembering it, it was like, Prabhupada was just so enthusiastic, and it was like his mood was like, "My God, I finally met somebody with half a brain in his head," and and they were just talking on like that. And Toynbee's idea was that all of Western history, his thing was the history of international relations, um, was really religious. That that Hitler had an ideology, that the Japanese had an ideology, that the Americans have an ideology, and still these ideologies are different. And that was really what was really motivating historical events. It wasn't economy, it wasn't even just ethical and moral level. And there are many people in the world we're dealing with, weren't able to mention them, who are on that level and writing on that level and so on, and coming in contact with these ideas. They're it touches them, and they're interested in these things. But that's what I understand. That Prabhupada was not only was he, you know, enlivened to teach people, but he was very, very much enlivened to learn from them, about their perspectives and ideas like that. But again, certain ideas and stuff which we think are destructive, horrible, yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tavi, ¿de dónde está usted?
I have met you in Guadalajara. You came to
Oh,
Guadalajara in around 2010, and
oh.
I was translating for you, and also in Mexico City, Ratha Yatra.
Yeah, your name is familiar. Of course, you're 15 years older now.
That's true. Yeah, hope I'm looking forward next time you come to Mexico.
I don't know if I'm going to travel anymore. Maybe next time I come to Mexico, I'll be at Chihuahua or something. I don't know. You can look for me in the street. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Vivarshi and I will become Chihuahuas in Mexico. have have no food, no economic problems then. Can eat garbage. Okay. So maybe I don't know. Maybe today we're here, and again our body is just falling apart. We're 3 years ago we were was it I think for 40% deaf, and the next year we were 50% deaf, and now we're the same thing's happening with our eyes and everything else and so on. So we may be disappearing from this body pretty soon. You know? But this is kind of like a little perspective on what we've done, and if more than like teaching, we're hoping just that people will be inspired by this. Some people will be inspired. This is something they can do. This is an area where they can, or they have friends, can work, because it's such a fertile area for people to communicate ideas. And the world needs it. The world's in a bad situation. That's not unusual, but and so we need the resources of all these different cultures. Yeah. Yeah. So I got one more chat bubble here popped up. As to say,
Yes.
Shiptarata, I really hope this great discussion will be available on YouTube. I'm between different trains and cannot hear everything, unfortunately. Thank you, Devarishi, in advance. What's his name? Leonard Cohen. You know him? They say there was a secret chord, and then when somebody David played, it would please the Lord. But you don't care for music, do you? Hallelujah, hallelujah. It's one of the most famous songs in the. It's arguably one of the two most famous songs in the world. Hallelujah. 160 artists have used it as the theme song for their albums. But Leonard Cohen, very, very nice musical, philosophical perspectives, and like that. But one of his songs is called it's called The Stranger, and one of those lines is you met him in between trains, like that. You met him in between trains on a station, and he's a gambler. He's a gambler, and he's looking for that car that is so high and wild, you'll never have to deal another. It's just like very archetypal. He and Carl Jung must love each other. Anyway, So many nice people and so many nice communities. You just have to get out there. So at this point, we want to thank everybody very much for your opportunity and hope you have a wonderful eternity forever.
There is a two person that want to speak. Sharada Mataji want to speak first.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, yes, open the mic.
Hare
Yes, speak.
Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Am I audible, Prabhu? Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. It's such a nice lecture that you're giving, and we never get tired to hear about your experiences with Carl Jung and the other Western philosophers. I used to wonder how come Guru Maharaj can connect all these cultures together. Sometimes we can relate to the culture that is there in Europe or in Spain, although we are brought up in a different kind of an environment. But somehow, somewhere, there is a connect, like what is happening in my state and what was happening long time back, although now the Western culture, some sort of change is there, I believe. But those that goes back many centuries ago, it kind of relates to what we had been practicing long back, and we're still continuing. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to hear these sessions again and again. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Of course, Mataji is from Manipur, and Manipur is an incredible culture in the foothills of the Himalaya mountains. And again, it offers access to, unbelievable resources and everything else. And also, I think even Manipur is, even though it's so remote and so we're preserved, it's still, I think, a very, very international culture. In my experience, there are people, even physically, people are from varieties of cultures there. They seem to come there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay.
Chitrarata Mataji, she has the end.
Oh,
She's in train, but maybe, yes.
Yes. Hare Krishna, everyone. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you so much. I could get some glimpse of the deepness of this lecture, and now I'm just really in between the platforms. So I hope there will be not too much noise. Woof.
Where are you going to?
Oh, sorry. Long train. Oh, okay. Stops. It goes. Okay. Oh, sorry. So just to say thank you so much. I have also to say that my grandfather was a psychiater, and I know he was very much influenced by Jung. He was every morning was going to take a bath at 5 o'clock in the morning in the lake before starting his job. So, voila. Thank you very much. I hope it will be on YouTube. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
We hope you meet interesting people in your travels.
I'm listening your class, so that's already something wonderful. Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay,
and I also met some of your disciples in Bhaktivedanta Manor. Her name is Taranga something. Okay. You have three generations of disciples in this family. The mother, the grandmother, the mother, and the daughters.
Tarangakshi.
Yes, exactly.
Tarangakshi.
And Rukmini.
Yeah, Rukmini is
very nice.
Rukmini went to Sweden or something. She's freezing to death. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh la la. Very nice ladies. I'm very happy to have known them.
They're very nice
So,
people.
yes, very nice.
Peru
So,
is a very mystic. Peru and Manipur, very very nice mystical places. We tried to organize that people could come and do their graduates, maybe do a graduate thesis. People could come from Peru to Manipur and study music, art, dance, and write a thesis on it, and other way around. But I should really go now. And I want to thank
okay.
everybody. Hope we have more of these
Thank you.
programs in the future. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Maharaj, for everything. And I hope, yes, before you are leaving your body, to have more program before.
Or else in the next body, we can all be together in the next body.
Okay, but at least we work with this body. Huh?
Chihuahuas in Mexico. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Maharaj. And thank you to all devotees. And I'm going to, yes, I record the thing. I'm going to put on YouTube and send the link after, to the devotee. Yes. Hare Krishna.